Welcome to the three birds. The three birds were initiated by Cosi, Doerfel, HiIl, and that was inspired by the three blokes in a pub. So here we are, the three birds tonight, and for reasons that you will soon discover, our episode is called Psychobirds. My name is Anette Pollner. I'm a writer. I'm published by HarperCollins UK, where I am actually listed as a British author under a pen name. I'm a translator and an actor and many other things. I have here with me two very special EU citizens, or birds. One of them is Emmy van Deurzen. She's a professor of existential psychotherapy, chair of Voices for Europe, and she's been a prominent member of UK and international counselling and psychotherapy at the highest levels for many years, so we're very lucky to have her here. And on the other side is the distinguished author Veronique. She is the co-editor of In Limbo, which is something we're going to talk about later. And she also has a PhD in comparative literature and the French Revolution, which might come in handy later. Absolutely. Veronique also is part of the very first Erasmus group, which has made her life a very European life. And I think that's true for all of us. So the actual theme of today, jokes apart, is the psychological impact of Brexit on EU citizens in the UK. And that's all of us. And this is something we've all three been living with for over 3 years, since actually before the referendum in 2016, and much more brutally since Article 50 was triggered, almost 2 years ago. And now with the dreaded settled state, an application that can be rejected and best case scenario will reduce us to second-class migrants in our own homes. So I'm going to start with myself, and then hopefully the distinguished birds next to me will be able to use me as a living example. So when I hear the word Brexit, I have to say I am terrified. I can feel it in when I say Brexit, I can feel all my muscles go like this. And then deep down it feels like it's hollow, and there's a terrible kind of darkness inside me. And I can function, of course, as we all can, and I'm trying to kind of put that on the back burner. But whenever I hear the word Brexit, there it is. And like many of us, I've lived here for decades. I live in London. London is my home. When I smell the underground, or when I go on the bus, or when I see all the trees, I forget this is home. But since the referendum, I know that I'm not welcome here. And there are powerful people who actually want to actively remove me from it. They've actually said so many times. I don't exactly know what will happen to me, and how it will happen to me, and I also don't know when. So added to this terror is this feeling of total uncertainty. I have no power over the events that affect me the most. At my age, it's incredible. And I was, and I still am for 2 more months, a citizen, an equal. But I will lose that equality, and I will become a second-class person, a migrant who has to apply to stay here and who has to register with the police. And there are days and nights when anxiety absolutely overwhelms me. And then there are other days when I fight, I go to events, I talk to people, I connect with others, but ultimately, inside, I am alone with my fear. This is how I live now. And I would like to invite you both to respond to that.
Well, I relate to a lot of what you're saying, and I think most of us do, because that's something that when we collected testimonies of EU citizens affected by Brexit in the UK, in our book In Limbo, we noticed that we are all coming from different countries, we are all of different generations, social backgrounds, and we feel exactly the same. And we feel exactly what you express. I mean, recently, I don't know if you will but I somatize it, the pain, is expressed physically. For instance, last night, well, I'll tell you frankly, yesterday and last night, I felt physically sick. And I know the sickness is the psychological sickness of it all. I've had it. I and other people I know have had really bad backaches because our back is full of the burden of Brexit. I've had panic attacks, and I know others have had. And what it's the symptom for me is I feel my chest is crushed, and I can't breathe anymore. And again, it's this feeling of being crushed, and everything, because I have a temperament that expresses physically psychological suffering. I express very physically Brexit is something I feel through all the pores of my body, and something that is completely I feel under siege. I can't function. I function superficially, exactly. But there is always, it's the attacks happen occasionally, but it's the sense of siege, the waiting. You know, I feel encircled. How do I get out of this circle? And then you have all the scenarios that happen at night when you can't sleep, in particular. And then you start projecting and visualizing what will it be, and if I go back to France and I can't come back, and if I do this, and if I do... And my life is simpler than others because I don't have children, but I know a lot of EU citizens with children who have that fear multiplied by hundreds, because there is always the thought, and what if my child can't come with me? What if my child has to choose between her father and me? What if what if I have to take my child with me, but then something happens to me and there is no other parent? I mean, the thoughts are endless, and they are nightmarish. We are living in a dystopia. It doesn't feel real. I don't know if you feel that as well, the sense of unreality. It's this sense of, I mean, please, Emmy.
Let's bring it in, Emmy.
Well, I think we simply refuse to believe that our lives can change in that way, isn't it?
Yes.
It's as if there is a complete disconnect between how it was before and after Brexit.
Yes.
And we're just sort of stunned by that initially. And we felt kind of shut up after that, because immediately after the referendum, if we tried to talk about it and express how incredibly upset and sad and despairing we felt about it, people would shut us up. And they would say, oh, nonsense, this is an exaggeration.
Yes, they still say
that. Why do you feel like that? You're just being over-dramatic. And it was really impossible to convey to people what it was like to be an EU citizen in a country that had just voted, that it didn't want to stay part of what to us is vital.
Yes.
This is our lifeblood.
Yes, absolutely.
My life has been European from the moment I was born. I was born in post-war Netherlands, which had been destroyed and devastated. And my whole early childhood was about realizing how lucky we were that people were willing to work together in Europe and that we were not going to have a third world war.
Exactly.
All my hope was on the European Union. My parents took us around to all the different countries so that we would learn the languages and we would talk to other kids in other countries so that we would create something special. When I was 18, I left the Netherlands. I went to study and work in France, where I lived for 7 years, and then I came to the UK. My students are very often European, and I'm just used to this identity of us all working together and us all belonging together as EU citizens. And then suddenly, it was like somebody ripped the cloth from the table, and everything landed in a different place, and we were suddenly undesirable. We didn't have a voice anymore because we already hadn't had a vote in the referendum, which was maddening, wasn't it?
Something that affects us more than anyone else.
Yes, I think we should talk about that.
Yes,
I agree
outrageous that we didn't have a vote.
Yes, and I remember when I went online talking about that before the referendum, I was being shut up.
Yes, we were.
People used to say, oh, don't do that. This has got to be a referendum for our own.
Yes.
Yes,
For our
yes,
own. Yes, yes.
For our
Yes,
own.
indeed. It has nothing to do with you. And
nothing to do with you.
And if you're not happy, you can go back to where you come from.
Yes.
Oh yeah, go back to where you come from. How often have you heard that?
Go home,
Yeah.
they would say.
Go home, and this is
Home
my
is
home.
here. Yeah.
I say, how long have you lived in the UK? And they'd say, I'm 35. And I'd say, well, actually, I've lived here for 42 years.
Yes.
And this is my home every bit as much as it is yours.
What's the response?
And why did I not get to vote on my future when I have paid taxes in this country for, decades? A little bit of respect here. I am your own. We are all together.
Yes.
Maybe I'm an adoptive child rather than a biological child. But when it comes to voting in a family, you don't exclude your adoptive children.
No,
you don't.
Everybody
It's
gets a
illegal.
vote.
It's illegal.
Yes.
No, absolutely, and I so agree with you. And you mentioned the key word, the word of identity,
Yes.
because that's what is it. That's the attack. That's why it hurts so much.
Yes.
It's our home, but it's our identity, because home is belonging, and belonging is linked to the sense of identity. And our sense of identity has been under atrocious attack, and we've had absolutely no weapons to fight it. We couldn't, as you said, Emmy, we couldn't even express what it meant to us, what was happening to us. We were shut down from the start, and we were looked down upon. And this lack of respect for us has been gnawing at us as well, because we are dehumanized by this attitude.
Yes. So let me remind you of some of the things that the people who come to our clinic for EU
Yes,
citizens.
please.
You have a special
Have
program.
told.
Can you just
Yes, so we
say
have,
what it is?
since June 2017, we have had an online and phone-based support service for EU citizens who have emotional and mental health problems. And the things they have told us about what they have experienced are appalling. To be fair, I have not experienced those things for myself, but clearly some people have had experiences where their children in school had to fill out forms to say whether they were citizens or not. And after the other children found out that they were foreigners, they were pestered and they were bullied, and the children didn't want to go to school anymore, and so the parents got more upset about that. We've had people who have been spat on in the street and called names regularly, neighbours who won't talk to them anymore, people who have not been able to relate to their in-laws anymore because in-laws have started excluding them from family occasions. We know people who have been physically attacked on public transport. It's really appalling stuff, and none of us were prepared for that.
No, but how could you be? I mean, you live your life in the EU, we lived our life in the assumption that we would be safe from such terrible events. And we certainly didn't think that it would happen so suddenly.
No.
I mean, if this had happened over a period of 10 or 15 years, that would be very different. But something from one day to the next, that's I think it's like a violent death. That's how it feels to me. I remember when one of my work colleagues suddenly didn't come into work and we found out he had died a violent death. That's how I felt.
Yes.
Very similar feeling.
But that's very true, because people express this sort of, they need to grieve, they're bereft. It's absolutely right.
The world makes no sense.
No, the world makes no sense.
Actually, there was when I asked in our group, what people would like us to talk about, I had this really moving testimony from a member of our group. She said, and it's exactly...
And the group is in limbo.
The group is in limbo,
You have the books.
We're a group of EU citizens, Brits included, because we're all EU citizens, who are suffering from Brexit.
For the next 65 days.
Well, and she said, my dad passed away unexpectedly last summer, and I had counselling sessions to help me work through the loss. During the sessions, I realised that some of the emotions I was feeling were very similar to Brexit. I had lost something fundamental to my identity.
Mhm.
With Brexit, I acquired many labels, from bargaining chip to queue jumper. Instead of being a person, just me, living at home, I am now a worker. I'm defined by what I do rather than who I am. I could stop being a worker tomorrow if I lost my job. Then who am I?
Yeah.
This was a real light bulb moment for me. It really got to the bottom of my discomfort and unhappiness. It helped me discover who I am and who I want to be, hence my decision to go where I can be me.
Yes.
So it showed her that, yes, through this grief counselling, that she was going through grief with Brexit, and that her identity is completely thrown into disarray.
Yes.
And that it's true, our value now is monetary value,
Well,
you know.
absolutely. And I think this is something many people are unaware of.
Yes.
That as long as we are workers and we pay tax, we can get away with it and we're sort of accepted and okay.
But there might be though a
But
minimum
we
level
know
of money
exactly,
that you need to
there will be a
earn.
minimum level
Yes.
and worse.
So for example, if you're a care
If
worker,
you
you
become
can't be
unemployed,
Yes.
or you
See?
commit a crime,
Yes.
or, you know, by chance or something
Yeah.
that can happen.
Of course.
If you get picked up in a demo or something like this,
Absolutely.
I'm very aware of
they
that.
can
Yeah.
immediately deport you.
Yeah.
It changes your status.
Absolutely.
We also know that the settled status is secondary legislation,
Yes,
which
yes.
gives us no guarantee.
Which can be
Yes.
changed at any point by the Home Office.
Yeah, no need
Yeah.
to go through Parliament.
So this is
So-
maybe we should explain this. So
There is no
secondary
safety.
legislation is not very well known.
No, it's not.
Because
But
many
it's
people think
dreadful.
that every law is made by Parliament. In Britain, at least, this is not the case. The majority of laws are
Voted
called
for,
secondary
yeah.
legislation. They come under sort of they come together by a law that is passed by Parliament, but the details can be changed at any time by the relevant
Exactly.
ministry.
Yes.
That's what we're talking
And I
about.
think there are a lot of EU citizens who have lost all their trust in
Yes.
the government
Totally.
and who fear that even if they get settled status, that next year or in 2 years' time, that may be taken away
Yes,
from them again.
absolutely. Well, it
And
happened
they find
before.
themselves with nothing.
And look at the comprehensive sickness insurance that was supposedly a necessity, what was a necessity imposed by the Home Office in order to get permanent residency
We
and
better
therefore
explain
citizenship.
this. We
Yeah.
better explain
Yes.
But this is a very, let me just say, this is a very complicated subject.
Yes.
Yes.
So we'll say, talk about it in a simplified
Simplify
form.
it.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
But so everybody was supposed to have had this insurance that nobody had ever heard of, and that had been described as illegal by the EU in 2012, and
Yes.
the EU had asked the British government, the Home Office, to remove that rule because it's incompatible with the NHS. But the British Home Office didn't remove that rule. It was not applicable to us before Brexit because we were protected by the EU. Suddenly, when that protection goes, we try to find protection here and make our status more stable. And then we're told, no, you can't have permanent residency, although you've lived here for decades and you always thought you'd done everything right, because you're supposed to have had this insurance that is not legal
Yes.
and that nobody knew about.
Yes.
So,
So basically, they suddenly start denying us the right to use the NHS.
yes,
And if you have been using the NHS, you start feeling terribly guilty. And also, if you haven't been working and you can't afford health insurance, then suddenly you're illegal. And the Home Office tells you, you can't get permanent residency, and we will tell you when you have to go home. And this has happened to many women who weren't at work, who were at home with children.
women are the most affected.
Women are the most affected. And they became terrified. They became afraid that the Home Office would physically remove them from the country and separate them from their husbands and their children. There were women who were in absolute despair about this. There was no support from the government whatsoever. So our support service is the only support service. So the government rips this all apart, takes away all of our security and provides absolutely no support system, no counselling, no help whatsoever.
And then it goes even, oh sorry.
I also want to just add that what was really got to me was the Windrush.
Yes.
The Windrush.
Of course, absolutely.
Because the same ministry, the Home Office, did something very similar that we are afraid of,
Yes.
to people who are actually British citizens.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I thought, if they can do this to British citizens,
Yes, I agree.
what are they going to do to us?
Quite right.
Well,
That
that
really
already
scared
called,
me.
yeah, and we're already called the second Winebar scandal.
Yes.
You know,
Yes,
we
in the
sort of,
making, definitely.
yeah, we are
yes.
waiting. It's a horrible situation. We are like in limbo, but we're also in this stage of waiting room for something really bad to happen
Yes.
to us.
Yes.
That is a horrible psychological torture.
Yes. Now let's put things in perspective, because people watching this will be saying, "Oh, they are too sensitive, snowflakes.
Yeah.
Why don't they grow up and stuff like that?"
Indeed.
And let me just say, our research has shown that EU citizens have responded in basically 3 different ways. So out of the 3.7 million people in this country from the EU, a group that is here on short contracts has said, "Oh, this doesn't concern me, it's just the same as always, I'm fine, what are they talking about?" So there are those people
Yes.
that aren't concerned,
Yes.
because actually we are pretty safe.
Yes.
They have a home to go back to in
Yes.
their country of origin, they're here
Yes.
for a short time. Then there's a group of people who became very angry straight away and who said, "They're not going to do this to me.
Yes.
I'm not going to be treated like this. I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. Don't you treat me like an undesirable." And many of those people have made arrangements to leave the
Yes.
UK.
Very, yeah.
But of course, unfortunately, because they have left, we don't have them here anymore to talk about this and let people know why they have left.
Yes.
And then there is this third group of people, which we all clearly belong to, who have felt this very personally, and some of us have still been resilient, but some of us have really gone downhill. And I can tell you, and I know you know this too, that there are some of that group who have become so distressed that they've become dysfunctional.
Yes.
They haven't been able to sleep, they haven't been able to eat, they haven't been able to socialize, they've hidden away in their houses,
Yes.
some have stayed in
Yes.
bed, some have started drinking, some have become suicidal.
Yes.
This is outrageous.
But I would-
We've allowed this to
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
And I would actually say I am one of them.
Really?
There are times when I feel so isolated and so scared that I don't leave my house, yes.
Oh, goodness, no.
And well, I mean, I can function if I have to, like most people.
Yes.
But because I'm so terrified is the word I use, because I'm frozen terrified. I'm frozen terrified all the time inside, all the time. And for me, because we're talking about identity, right? Although I have a German passport, I don't actually identify with any particular nation. I'm a refugee child. My parents came from different parts of Eastern Europe. My mother was on a refugee track in January 45 at the age of 15. It's January again,
Yeah.
right now. And she was a very disturbed person all her life. I mean, I don't even know that for 4 months. So this is my personal background.
Yeah.
I was born without a passport. When I was 10, my father got a passport because he was a teacher, and in Germany if you're a teacher you have to be a civil servant, and for that you need a passport, so I was lucky. But I don't identify with any passport. My grandfather lived in what is now Eastern Slovakia. He lived there for a long, long time, I think 45 years. In the time that he lived in the same village, his nationality was changed 5 times. So to my family, nationality means absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And the EU is wonderful, as you can see.
But
Stability. Yeah.
this really is a double hit for me because I thought 70 years of peace never happened before in Europe.
Exactly.
All my ancestors were in horrible wars and horrible things
Same here.
happened to them. And that's true for everybody. And everybody who is watching is also true for you.
Yeah,
But
totally.
But this safety that I felt, I now really feel that it is deceptive.
Yes.
And I would like to ask you something, and I would give you my example myself. When the referendum happened, I knew immediately what was going to happen.
Yes.
To us and to Britain, and I used to work in the City of London, I knew, for example, that the banks were going to leave and blah, blah. This was clear to me, and I can prove it because I published an article. I published an article 1 week afterwards and predicted all the things that have now happened. I was like, you stupid, nothing will happen like this. There were many people who were as clear-sighted as I was, but here we are, and every day my worst fears are being confirmed.
Same here. That's exactly it. That's how I feel. And the worst case scenario always happens. Because, for instance, the way we've been treated was totally unnecessary.
You're right.
The Cameron government wanted to give us our rights the day after the referendum, and the only person who objected to it was Theresa May, because of our obsession with the hostile environment and
it would
immigration.
have been very easy.
It would have been
very
easy.
easy. All of us have national insurance.
Oh, it would have been
absolutely
very easy,
and all of us have been.
Yeah, that would be the easiest thing. Anyone who has a national insurance number could have registered but not applied. That would have been the easiest thing to do.
Well, we should have been offered short-track access.
Of course we should.
But
it didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen.
The opposite happened, actually, because what should have happened is that after Brexit, the rules would have changed, instead of which they changed the rules on which we built our lives, the guarantees on which we built our lives, retrospectively, without asking any assent from us, and without talking to us about it. And that's why our life has been completely thrown into limbo. We can't make plans. The present is difficult because the present without the near future is very difficult to live. I mean, we spend our lives projecting. We can't project.
How do you do it?
How do I do?
How do you live your life day to day?
I fight. I mean, well, that has been my way. My way has been to fight. I think I still feel very close to the state of childhood, where unfairness is unbearable.
Yes.
And I've always, and I think, I can see what we are so similar. Yeah, we are very. Maybe that's why we do what we do. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
And when it affects others, I am incensed, and this time it affects others and me, and it's so unfair. It's unfair. It's the opposite of what I thought Britain was. I feared for France. I never feared for Britain. I thought, land of tolerance, land of creativity and openness.
Fairness.
Fairness. I agree.
Did you really think that? I did never really thought that. But
Yes,
you clever thing. I did. I believed in the exceptionalism.
It was also the land of diplomacy.
Yes.
That's the irony too.
Yes.
But it was the country that was actually very important in building the European Union. It showed people often how to do it and how to do it in a fairer way. And all of that's been lost.
But I'm just laughing because in the EU, right, in the EU Commission, they were also afraid of the diplomats from Britain who would be so clever, and now it's turned out they are the
They are.
The thing to remember though is that it's a tiny little group of people who are behaving against what are actually British values as well as European values.
Yes, I agree.
What we need to remember is that we're actually all on the same side.
I agree.
Because, you know, we have been the canaries in the coal mine. And it has hit us before, you know, the birds.
Yes.
In the coal mine.
With the birds.
Who have gotten the bad smell straight away and who have felt faint, but we are the warning side and people should listen.
I agree.
Because what they're doing to us is also going to be done to all UK citizens. Who are all going to lose their EU citizenship.
And their rights.
And their rights. They're going to abolish the Human Rights Act as well. That's the first thing they're going to do. No, they've already said so.
Yes.
But it's in that
ask
you as well, Emmy.
Yes.
How are you coping?
Well, I started coping well before this. I saw it coming in 2015 and I started applying for my British citizenship.
You are so good.
From December 2015. I put my application in January 2016 and I thought, oh, I'm that clever, I'm going to get my vote in the referendum.
Oh yes,
then,
I
didn't. I got rejected.
remember.
My application got rejected twice.
I remember.
And then I realized we were in a different world.
Yes.
This was not a rational world. This was Kafkaesque.
Totally, it is Kafkaesque.
I couldn't understand how they could reject me after having created
Yes.
organizations,
British organizations.
yes, giving jobs to over 100 people, paying tax for 40 years, being married to a Brit, having raised British children. How can they reject me?
Yes, right. Yes.
It just didn't make sense.
But it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
This happened 2 months before the referendum.
Ah.
So I knew what was going to happen, because I knew what they
Right.
were doing to me. And then I started, like you, fighting and saying, I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm going to stand up. They'll see who they're dealing with here. This is not going to happen to this country that I am joining.
You know, I so agree. I felt the same. The first I fought was for the country,
Yeah,
because I thought I was safe.
yeah.
I hadn't done what you did. Therefore, I thought, I've lived here for 32 years. When I settled down in 87, I asked, what paper do I need?
Yeah.
Because in France, we need so many papers. And at the French consulate, I'm up to date, I can promise you. So I asked again and again, and they said, nothing. You're at home here, you need nothing.
Yeah.
Therefore, I was lulled, and at the time they meant it. It was that country. It was that beautiful, trusting, open country.
Yeah.
But things were changed behind closed doors by Theresa May, and the rights of spouses in particular. Because I think of her particularly because she's the one who created the Skype families, and the Skype families were linked to removing marital, protection for marital status.
So this is all part of the so-called hostile environment.
Yes, it is.
Created by Theresa May when she was set in the Home
very
Office.
early on.
Yes.
We dealt with it from 2012 onwards.
Yeah, that's when she started.
Because we had lots of foreign students who suddenly couldn't get their Tier 4 visas anymore because she just changed the rules.
Exactly, these were the non-EU students. at
Yes.
the time.
And that's secondary law.
Yeah.
That's secondary law. That's done behind closed doors.
And
That's the same,
and that
exactly the same
got
process.
worse and worse and worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So universities like us, who are private, couldn't do this thing anymore, when in the past we had the right to do that for our
Yes.
students. So we had 7 or 8 students who had to stop their doctoral programs in the middle and find another university to go to. This is when I first contacted my MP, who was Nick Clegg at the time, and asked him to deal with the Home Office and tell them that this was crazy what they were doing. They were destroying higher education by being so xenophobic about our students.
Yes.
Who didn't intend to live here or take any benefits, who were bringing money into the country.
Absolutely.
So thank you for telling us all this. So I think let's talk about this fixation of the current British government to reduce what they call immigration.
Yes.
We are actually not immigrants.
We are not
we are
immigration.
citizens
Yeah.
exercising our rights.
People not know that. I think we should
Yes,
talk
you should
about
make
that.
that point.
Yeah, we should make that point.
As I, in my
Yes.
famous article,
Yes.
so there are two things here. One is the conflation of freedom of movement, migration, and asylum.
Yes.
These are 3 completely different things.
Yes.
So asylum is when you are not safe in the country where you have been living, and then you can claim asylum so that another country can keep you safe.
Yeah.
That's the conditions
That's
under
refugee status.
Yeah. Like me, my parents were both
Yes.
refugees. I know
Yes.
exactly. And also,
And
I
it's
worked-
a very sacred and special thing.
and I worked in Bangkok for a long time counseling refugees, so I know everything about it. It's a very, very difficult, psychologically
Yes.
also difficult situation.
But that's a whole other ballgame.
That is one, and I will also say, because I say it wherever I can, that the UK is the country in the EU that takes the fewest refugees.
Yes.
Not in relative terms, in absolute terms.
Yes.
And that is just absolutely scandalous.
Shocking.
Scandalous. So this is the asylum. The other one is migration.
Yes.
Migration is when you go to another country, you live there either temporarily or permanently, but you are not a refugee. So you're not persecuted in your country of origin. Migration is a normal thing that happens all the time.
And that has happened throughout human history.
Absolutely.
That's why we have the world we have, thanks to migration.
And migration only really became a big deal when the nation state was introduced.
Yes.
Before the nation state, in Europe, people walked around everywhere and settled everywhere.
Yeah.
And
And traveled
yeah.
really easily.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is quite a new thing.
Yes.
But the newest child on the block is
Yes.
freedom of movement.
Absolutely.
I love freedom of movement, particularly with my background, but
Yeah.
for everybody,
Yeah.
because suddenly I have a country that is 30 countries big. A whole continent is, I am a citizen. I love saying I am a citizen. I know in France this is a big deal.
Yeah.
I am a citizen. And I am not a migrant, I am a citizen. Now, what is freedom of movement? Freedom of movement is a new concept.
Yes.
It has never existed before. It is a transnational concept.
Yes.
It means that we, all of us, and you, as you're watching, if you're an EU citizen, are no longer just a citizen of one country. We have another citizenship in 30 other countries, and it is a real citizenship. You can take a job, you don't have to ask anyone for permission. It can be a part-time job or a full-time job. You can start a business, you can retire, you can get health benefits, you can do many, you can send your children to school.
You can
Many,
fall in
many
love, and live there with the love you've met.
Absolutely.
That is
As you both
extraordinary.
have done, I
Yes.
think.
Whereas now, it's going to be impossible to do that.
Yes.
And even the people who have married in that
Yes.
way find themselves in dire straits.
Yes.
But the
Which is
reason,
insane.
the reason why all these three have been conflated
Yes.
in Britain is so that we are all reduced to the worst possible
Yes.
status. Everybody is reduced to the status of an asylum seeker. That is the idea behind it. And the windrush people were also reduced to the status
Yes.
of an asylum
And-
seeker, although they are British citizens.
I know, which is not. I think personally, it's the otherness. We are othered. We are no longer part of society.
Yeah.
We are the other one,
Yeah.
the other, and the other is looked at with suspicion and fear.
Other becomes dehumanized.
Exactly.
And dealt with
demonized.
as dangerous
And less than you.
demonized.
When you're the other,
Yeah.
is less than you.
Yeah.
And I love going up to
Yes.
British people and saying,
Yes.
I'm your equal.
Yeah.
You would be astonished at the aggressive results I get from
Well,
saying
from
that.
some people. Let's be careful not to
not everybody
generalize,
at all.
because, dear people, we do know that there are many
Wonderful.
British citizens who actually love EU citizens and who claim their own status as EU citizens.
Yes.
And we are not talking about you. We don't mean you.
And you are actually what made Britain so attractive to us.
Yes.
Because you had the dominating narrative, and that narrative was so beautiful that it lured us away from our beautiful countries. Because we all come from really beautiful countries as well.
Totally.
But,
And we love Britain.
and we love Britain.
And we love Britain,
we love
but we
Britain
love
passionately.
Europe too.
We love
We
Europe.
love Britain
And we have our roots. And we love our
And now we
native
have
countries as
to
well.
take a short technical break.
Yes. Can I just make one
Yes.
final point? Which is that actually British people understand these things because they love going to European countries on their holidays, or they love retiring in other
Yes.
European countries.
Oh, let's take this up after the
Also-
break because that's
yeah,
really
but
important.
also, let's remember that 5 million British citizens live all around the world.
Yes.
It's a travelling nation and they understand about freedom of movement, and we just need to make sure, we don't lose it.
Let's take that up again
Yes.
after the break.